Welcome to this talk, and we're here with Dr. Tim Kelly and Mr. Neil Oliver, and we're here to discuss one of Neil's new books, one of many, on hauntings. Now, it sounds a bit supernatural, Neil, really. What motivated you to write a book about this?
I always write about history one way or another, and I felt that this was another way to invite people in, because all of these stories of hauntings, that they're all very much tied to places, houses, battlefields, various locations in the landscape. And I'm always interested by the way in which a location will become famous, often for something that was a very brief event. You know, a battle, some of the classic battles, like a Culloden or a Bannockburn. When you're really talking about things that happen over the course of hours or at most a day or so. But of course that place is then means many more things to generation after generation of people. You know, that to which we pin significance is a transitory. And there are residues of all of the events that unfold in a place, arguably, that linger. And I felt over the last few years where so many people, and myself included, I've gone through a lot of anxiety, a lot of uncertainty, a lot of stress. And it's in times of sustained stress for whole populations at the same time that historically there have often been manifestations of phenomena. And you might say, and there might be quite reasonable scientific reasons for saying that, or for asking the question, why wouldn't the stress of millions of people felt at the same time, why wouldn't it manifest in ways that people might experience? And really, when you say what was my motivation to write it, really, in the simplest of terms, it was because decades of making the kind of history documentaries that I had been making had put me in the presence of people of all sorts, academic people, regular people like myself, and there were so many instances where people would say, a funny thing happened to me here. I was often on a television filming day. We would be with someone who had a connection to a battlefield or a connection to a church or whatever, and they were there on the day to tell us something personal or something specific. But during the course of a long day, so often people would say, don't tell anyone, but I was here once 20 years ago and I saw such and such, or I felt the presence of. And really, collectively, over the years, I thought, all these people can't be lying. Neither are they just making it up for fun. Maybe some of them are. Maybe it's just, something that they're doing out of a sense of, harmless mischief. But a lot of these experiences that people are having and attesting to, they've experienced something. And it falls to the edges of, what we're invited to think about in our science and technology-dominated world. But I thought, it's surely high time to have some open conversations about what people are experiencing.
I mean, to me, the book was very much about history, very much a sense of place, but something very human about it.
Well, I don't know about you, Tim. I don't know about you, John. I don't know if you've had any experiences like it, but they're certainly not unusual. Many people will under the right circumstances, will say that they've experienced something, and it's usually in a location. Yeah. It's usually they've gone somewhere and
tied to place.
Yeah, they've experienced something in a location, and it's a very common human phenomena. Part of the problem, I think, for people, many people want to talk about these things, but there's a degree of ridicule that goes with saying, "I saw a ghost." Yeah. Or I think I had an encounter with the supernatural. People are wary of doing it for fear of ridicule, for fear of being thought to be slightly, kooky or mad. And I think that's a shame, and it's a consequence of so much of this being driven to the periphery by science. Science doesn't address this kind of story.
There's no space in science for this at all, is there?
Why would there be? Why would there be? But it means that the language even is archaic. For people that want to talk about these sorts of experiences, they're kind of pushed into anachronous language. They have to talk about ghosts, and they have to talk about spirits, and it makes them feel uncomfortable. So even the language associated with these phenomena Even the word phenomena sounds a bit woo-woo, but it only means, it's Greek. I mean, it only means something like that which appears or is seen.
Yeah.
It's actually factual. This is real phenomena. And people definitely want to talk about it, and I hoped that by recounting some of the stories in the book will be familiar. You know, there's the Brown Lady of Rainham Hall. You know, there's visitations by spectres like Henry VIII and Anne Boleyn that people might expect in places like Windsor Castle and the Tower of London. Others, though, will be less familiar, and it was all in an attempt to reassure people, really, that these kinds of experiences are real, inasmuch as all sorts of people have them. And I think there are useful, helpful conversations that people can have.
Yeah, human experience is intrinsically legitimate, isn't it? Yeah. When we stop listening to people's experiences, we're missing something. Tim, you're the straight guy in this. Initial thoughts?
I'm pretty sceptical. I can actually remember, have you ever come across The Captain's Wife?
No.
So the village that I come from in Wales, a little tiny village called Sully, and there's a pub there called The Captain's Wife, and it's called The Captain's Wife because there was a ship a long time ago. The captain basically smuggled his wife onto the ship, and the crew found out about it, and it was a time when it was not the done thing, it was bad luck to have a woman on the ship. And so if I recount the story correctly, they chucked her overboard basically in the chest, and she drowned, and then this captain's wife has been haunting the area ever since. I quite like to I like to think that there is something to these stories, and especially like astrology as well. I like to read about horoscopes and things like that because I just think it's fun. But I suppose deep down I'm quite sceptical about it.